Welcome back, everyone. It is March 18th, 2026. It is Wednesday. Welcome back. And yeah, let's jump in here. So, it's been about a week or so that I haven't recorded anything. And the reason why is because I wanted to see where these charts were going to go. Now, obviously, yeah, this is where we are right over here. Let's dive into where we touched upon in the last video. First of all, we made this line here. And this was something that I was making you aware of. This trend line here, we dropped in, I believe, sometime halfway into the video or something like that. And I said, this is something to pay attention to. We can now drop in this line right over here. The other thing that I was talking about was that we were in this range. This is the range that we are in currently. You can obviously see that we have broken out of that range a bit. Now, this right here is a bit of a change of character. Change of character. Because we actually got above this right over here. And that's why that's a change of character. There's something brewing there. But here's the thing about this. Ranges have a characteristic to them. Now, I pointed this out before to you. I said that this is starting to feel like what happened in December. This is December, right over here. And let's just break this out a little bit so that we can see exactly what's what. Let's put in all of the lines here. This was the range that it was stuck in, right over here. This was the range. Actually, it was right at the bottom, right over here. This is the range that we were stuck in, right there. Now, if you look really closely at this range right here, we've got the same thing going on right over here. See right there in the top, right over there? This is the same exact thing. We got some wicks that are poking out. We got some wicks that are poking out a bit. And then we've got this thing that happened. And at this point, this is when everyone was feeling like we were going and we were actually breaking out. But notice that over here, on this side, notice that over here on this side, we've got this extra wick that's right here, this extra candle. And this was kind of the gap that was here that made it unbalanced, right? Now, notice we've got this over here as well. We've got this. So we have got very, very similar characteristics going on here. And sure, this was a much tighter range right over here, but a range is a range. And a range has the same kind of characteristics. Now, when we got over to this section right over here, let me get rid of this and this and this. When we got over to this section right over here, what I said is that if it breaks, it needs to come back and it needs to retest this. Meaning it needs to find some kind of support to make its next leg up. And the same thing goes for over here. This is the characteristic of a range. No matter what you do, in a range, anytime we break out of one side, it has to come back and retest. It doesn't matter what side it breaks out of. If it broke out of the other side, for example, if it broke out of the other side, it still would need to come back and retest. And this is where people usually get stumped up. Because what happens is while this is a change of character, there's also a lot of manipulation in this environment. And usually what I've noticed is that when there is a range, it ends up coming through and it usually manipulates twice. Oh, let me do this again. It usually manipulates twice. That's what it does. And then it comes back in here to grab some strength, and then it ends up breaking out. Just like so. Wherever it's supposed to break out of. Okay? And in that set, usually this is the best place to buy, and this is the best place to buy, right? Either buy or sell, or short or long. Okay? So now, knowing that, let's take a look at this again. If you take a look at this right here, this is the range that we were in. Where would have been the best spot for a short? Obviously, this would have. That absolutely would have been the best place for a short. What would have been the best place for a long in the same range? It was outside of the range itself. Even both of these points right over here were good. So these two are considered like manipulation 1 and manipulation 2. And usually in a range, it has two forms of manipulation. In this one right over here, you can see we are starting to break back into the range. And yet we still got this kind of hanging out over here. If this does not find any strength, and it doesn't find any strength at all to build back up over here, this is not considered a retest. This I would consider manipulation. It would be no different than this. Now, going back to, I keep on doing this, sorry about that. Now going back to what we have here, if you look at this over here and you look at this, they look very, very similar. And that's why I said in the previous videos, it looks like we are doing the same thing that we did in December. And the reason why I feel like this is still in play is really because of this wick right over here. This wick feels very unfinished to me. Not only that, if we go and we take a look on the outside here, if we look a little bit further, you can obviously see what happens when we have a range altogether. When we have a range, even if we go back into the previous range, notice that we broke out over here, we went into this range and we started doing it. We started just kind of like moving in this range. Usually in a range, it explores both ends of the range fully. It'll go from one side to the other. Now notice how it went up above here. It started to range a bit, but then it came back over here. This would have been considered a retest. The reason why this would be considered a retest is because if you notice, this was the high point right over here, and it was close enough that it would be considered a retest. And then it bounced its way up. And that's what we were looking for from this side, and we were looking for from this side right here. But what I've noticed in ranges is that when we break out of a range, so let me just do this real quick, and we come into another range here. This right here. Okay, so if I do this, and we break out into another range, just like so. And now we go like this. When it eventually comes back, this is considered a fair value gap right over here. When it comes back and it actually goes into the previous range again, usually what it does is it breaks all the way back down to the 50% line. And it retests that. And then it swoops down, works its way up, and then it breaks out again. And if you look at this, this becomes a huge either head and shoulders or a Bart pattern or whatever. So yeah, this is what it looks like over here. And that's why I feel like this is still in play, because we've got this wick right over here, and we've got this wick right over here that feels very, very heavy to me, as like this chart is really unbalanced. Now, it doesn't really have to get balanced. We can start to skyrocket. We can come over here, we can tap on this trend line, and we can work our way back up, and it'll feel like we will never come back down. But honestly, this is a target right there, and this is an imbalance. And I don't care if it's 1 year from now or 5 years from now, there will be a moment where this chart will come back and try to test these areas. So while I have them on the chart, and I'm very much like conscious to the fact that it's there, and we are in a bear market. We are in a bear market, meaning that resistance is going to struggle the most. So if it were to come up here, for example, then it's not going to break out. It's not going to do that. What it's going to do is it's going to react. And if it reacts, it could possibly come back down over here. That's what a bear market does. Resistance rejects. Support barely holds. And right now, this is our support level right over here. Okay? So that's what I'm looking at. Now, I do want to show you some other things real quick. Let me jump over to this other chart, to Ethereum. And I marked out some things here, so you can see it. So one, Ethereum ran pretty heavy. I mean, this is a really amazing move that it did. And what you should know is that while this was moving the way that it was, when Ethereum starts to have a lot of dominance, what happens is that Bitcoin can actually drag it down. So once they start to swap, you end up seeing that these moves that were made start to become reversed. And while it had an amazing move going up, it's going to have an amazing move going down as well. They have to be in sync with each other, and they have to be able to break out of their ranges and really start to move forward. But really, truth be told, Bitcoin has to lead the way in some kind of way. When Bitcoin grabs a hold of the bull again, or grabs a hold of the bear again, whichever one that it's on the side of, it's going to drag all the rest of the charts down. So this really became an opportunity for you to long and short. Now, I shorted in this area, and I've taken profit over here. Now, how did I know to short in this area? And why would I short in this area? If you take a look over here, notice that I put two lines there. If I go down to the lower chart here, if I go down to let's go down to the 1 hour chart, you can actually see why I drew those two lines over here. Oops, let me undo that. This line right over here has to do with this candle right over here. And it also has to do with this candle right over here. Notice that there's a wick right there. So what I have is, I have this block right over here. Now let me go down to a lower time frame let's take a closer look at this area. There you go. So in the 15-minute, you can see where I actually got the top of this from. And if you notice, there is a little bit of white right over here making this a wick. So this became my area of interest right over here. Now, again, look, you can see that this is actually touching the red block. So, I mean the red line. So you can actually see where I drew this line and why I drew this line over here and why I drew this line over here. I had connecting points on here. Now, this is something that I was keeping in mind right there. But what I did was I kind of like used that as a little bit of a wick. Like, okay, I'm aware that it's there. Let me overshoot if I need to. So what I did was I used this section right over here as a resistance area. And when it came into this area, you'll see what happens. Now, I did not short right away, just so you know. I waited. And look what it did. On a lower time frame, I'll even go to the 15-minute. On a lower time frame, we've got this move that was here. It created this trend line going up. This trend right over here in this channel that it was in. And then it started to shift. It started to shift. Now, if you've been watching my videos from the very beginning, you'll know that I look for this right over here because it'll either continue going up or it'll continue going down. But because Bitcoin was starting to, was feeling a lot more weaker on its chart, I felt like this really wasn't going to hold. So while this was ranging, I actually entered right over here. This is where I entered. And I have since taken profit. Notice that I made a resistance area over here because of where these two wicks are on a lower time frame. And this is basically telling me that we are looking to get back into this section right over here. So that's why I shorted in that area. Now, where are we going? Well, I'll tell you what, this is all more of the same. Now, the last video that we made with this, I put this trend line in here. And well, now this trend line is my target. Because we've got 1, 2, 3, I see that it's going to come and touch this again. And if it slips out, it's going to be coming back over here. And if it slips out over here, we're going to be making our way back over here. So as far as my plan goes, my plan is the same for this area right over here. I am currently in a short and I am in a long that I've taken profit on. I'm in a long in this section. That's where I longed. So I am hedging the market right now and tapping whatever I can. As far as my spot goes though, my spot plays, I've already stacked some crypto over here. When we got down over here, I am in profit, but I'm looking to stack a hell of a lot more when we get down over here. So that's my goal at this point. My plan is to stack some more crypto when we get there, when we get down to that target area. Even if we get down to this low, I'll be DCAing in to add some more to my stuff. And at this point, if we do hit this zone right over here, I will be looking at to pick up some spots on alts. So hopefully you were able to see all of that. Hopefully you were able to follow exactly what's going on. My eyes are on this zone right over here, the characteristics of this zone echoing in this section right over here. And if we do get down to this zone right over here, then I think it's going to be telling what's going to happen. If we get some kind of bounce over here, then I think, you know, it's very well possible that we can come back up to the top over here to retest this area for Bitcoin. But until we get to that point, yeah, it's more of the same. All right, guys, stay safe. Hope you're able to read these charts. Talk to you soon. Bye.